with us this Thursday morning. Joining us is Dr. WISDOM Enang, joining us right now. Of course, himself an expert in the oil and gas sector and a very vocal voice for that matter in that sector. We'll be having this conversation with him this morning. Good morning, Dr. Enang. Good to have you on Rise and Shine.
Hi, good morning. Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me.
Good morning, Doctor.
How is Abuja?
Well, we're doing good. It's the weather is very warm, and I'm caught in between schedules, but I had to come on this one because this is not only is the station something a place that I treasure so much, but also the fact that you're always keeping up with topical issues is something very interesting. I think it's I will always create time for Spectrum TV.
Thank you so much for the warm and kind words this morning. I must also add, you look really nice this morning. Somewhere like, some part of the South. You're looking Delta-ish this morning.
Yes, I this is, if you look at me, the signature I typically put on is the Ankara, and that's been my signature for a while now.
Oh wow! Thank you for repping Nigeria and all of these places. Well, we have this looks like a good step in the right direction in terms of conversations around the oil and gas sector. We've seen that President Bola Tinubu has approved 3 new directives in the oil and gas sector, now looking to introduce fiscal incentives for related projects. Now he's looking to reduce contracting costs and timelines for projects in the sector and promote cost efficiency in local content requirements. But let me take you back to the very beginning. Introducing new fiscal incentives for related projects in the oil and gas sector. What does that mean for, a layman, fiscal incentives?
Okay, so I'll take you a little bit down history lane. Mm-hmm. The oil and gas has been operating on what we call the Petroleum Act, and this was back in the 80s. It was drafted. Now, what does that tell you? Between now and today and then, there've been some efforts to draft in what we will call the Petroleum Industry Act that we have today. And what was that effort about? The effort was to reform the oil and gas governance framework, in addition to also making it competitive. But here is the catch. The moment you spent more than 20 years drafting a law, the Petroleum Industry Act, the risk is before you then pass that law, a lot of events would have been overtaken by a lot of events. So by the time Nigeria passed the law, we found out that the physical incentives that were there were somewhat moribund, for lack of a better word, because imagine when you've taken 20 years, and in that 20 years you thought giving an investor 10% was good, and before you still have your 10%, and you've put it through 20 years, and you've then passed it with 20 years, and then found out that another jurisdiction, perhaps somewhere in the Permian Basin, somewhere up in Papua New Guinea, or somewhere up in Guyana, where they have new oil findings, is giving the investor 20%. So what that means is that whatever you've been drafting for 20 years is come to null and void. So what the president has done is to say, can we go back and we look at our attractiveness, what we call the competitiveness of our investment portfolio? Is it something we can do? And if we can do it, what do we need to tweak a little bit to attract investors? Now remember, the Petroleum Industry Act, any act for that matter, is actually an act that builds the framework. But to implement the act, you then have things like regulations. Regulations need to be drafted to be able to implement the act. And on that, we then have the presidential executive orders. So you have regulations and presidential executive orders, which is now the engine that drives the act. So people will be wondering, well, is the president trying to override the act? No, the act is a framework. The act could say, well, we would provide incentives to investors to attract them. The act could stop there. the regulations will say we will provide 10%, 20%, 15%, or the presidential directive could do that. So that's just to give you context. It is in light of the fact that the oil and gas terrain is changing very quickly, and we need to be competitive to attract the inflow that the president has signed that particular executive order.
Okay, Doctor, I'm going to come from a different angle this morning. Recently, we also saw the president, the federal government implementing a new expatriate quota policy that has been widely criticized. Just yesterday, we saw the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, coming out to say that the policy is against the Renewed Hope agenda and the move by President Ahmed Bola Tinubu to ensure, that Nigeria's economy is, opened up and then investors get into the country. Now, in the light of this, the president's new order and the expatriate quota, which will mandate multinational companies to pay a certain amount of money for the expats that are bringing in, are these two policies working together, or are they working against each other? Just looking at the provisions of the different policies by President Ahmed Tinubu.
Now let me tell you, I'm going to answer this from an experiential standpoint. I've been working in the oil and gas sector, and I'll put this to you. You sometimes find yourself, you're working in the oil and gas sector, and just because of the passport you have, one person is earning, say, 300,000 naira per month, and the next person is earning in odds of about 10 million per month because they're an expert. I've been there. So you're talking to the choir. I've actually been there. Now, I'll tell you what, we need to balance things. Now, you could ask yourself, while I was rising up and doing the same work as some of those experts, because I rose very quickly, how did I feel? It was really tough. It was really, really tough. I was told that those were the rates applied. So essentially, the rates of expatriates were not applied based on the job they were coming to do. It was applied based on passport. So even if they were sweeping, you would pay them the rates because of, that. And the truth of the matter is this. Sometimes it looks good for cash call. When some of these operators want to get money from government, they just put experts. Let me tell you what, a lot of manpower supply people would rather put experts, because if government is paying them 20% for each expert they bring, it makes more money than paying for a Nigerian. So I've been there. They don't have a working knowledge like I do. I've been there walking down corridors, not able to afford the most basic thing for myself, and I'm doing a job for the same job with someone else that is earning more than 100 million in a year. I don't know what it feels like. So the truth is,
okay.
President is trying to do is to say, well, is there a way we can also tap into these expert earnings in a way so much that also, if people are feeling bad, then raise the indigenous workforce. I'm speaking to you today as an expert. You didn't need to get a white man who would tell you you have to pay X amount of money. So the truth is, somebody decided to raise me to this standard, and that's why I'm here. So the truth is, if people don't like it, then they have the alternative of raising the Nigerian workforce. We're very smart people. We can work very hard. So there is an alternative. There's nothing telling them to do expert. I do the job of so many experts, even in the US, and I do it very well, and I'm a Nigerian. And it's because I went through a system and I was trained. So there's so many Nigerians like yourself, like myself, and everybody else who are very smart and who can be trained. If they don't like President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's option, they should train the Nigerian workforce. We have the same brain, we can do it.
This very revelatory, we must actually acknowledge, because sometimes when the administration of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu brings some policies, the cutbacks are usually really intense. But on the flip side, how do you hope that the leadership of the oil and gas sector will leverage on this to make sure that it's in favor of the workforce? Remember that part of the issues that we have is that of corruption. Now, we might have this policy in place, leveraging on all of these things, but will that still turn out to better pay and better job opportunities, or even role opportunities for Nigerians in the oil and gas sector?
Well, yeah, let me tell you, when I entered the oil and gas sector, we were lacking people. I remember being asked to bring at least 20 people to start work almost immediately. And that's because we had so many projects. We had the Bonga, we had ExxonMobil had a lot of projects, we had LNG, we had so much. So investors were coming, and we couldn't. I personally helped about 4 Nigerians from Australia to come on board on projects, and I made sure because they had Australian passports. They were paid expert levies, and I was happy because originally they kicked back and said, "Well, you're Nigerian. Your surname is Olatunde. Why are you saying you're an expert?" I'm like, "No. Well, if you're saying expert is by passport, then this guy is an expert. He's got his passport. You can, you can forget about me that doesn't have that passport." But the point I'm trying to make is this: if things open up, if we are able to attract investments, a lot of jobs are going to be created. You're going to find people jumping from one job to the other. In fact, back in the days, you will have one job, and then you use that offer letter to go and renegotiate another pay because there's another job that's looking for you. And so we just take one offer letter, we go to the other and say, "Look, we're about to start tomorrow, but if you give us 20% more, we'll go." And the next minute, we have another offer because the industry is small in size of number of participants, but big in volume of money. So that's going to be a good one. The other one that we need to look at very carefully is, in light of all the technological advancements that we have in today, we need to make sure that we can hold on to our local content because there's a trend that is coming up. People are contracting technical centers abroad and sending jobs via the internet to be done. So the thing is, how do we regulate and make sure that we keep our jobs and we are not losing jobs because now the world is a global village. You can send your designs to China to be done, that we're not doing that, and companies are not short-circuiting the entire place. So because what companies will typically do is, if you stop them from getting physical experts in, they will go on to virtual experts. And so how do you do that? And so those are the things that the government needs to come up with, because they need to do a scenario analysis and understand that sometimes you close one hole and the rat runs to the other hole, and how are you going to make sure that you trap that rat in the conditions that you actually want to? Because I will tell you this, we push for the national oil and gas companies to take over, but I'll tell you this for free. They have less discipline than the international, their international counterparts when it comes to hanging on to and holding the faith on the regulations and the laws that govern the land.
Okay, Dr. Just before we let you go, because you know this morning is quite busy for you, what is your advice to Nigerians at this point? Because you've raised a whole lot of valid concerns. I remember talking to an expert in the maritime sector, and he raised same concerns that you have raised. You bring in somebody from outside the country to do the common jobs that Nigerians are very well equipped to do, and then they get paid all of these millions of naira. They don't even get to pay, tax to the Nigerian government. So what's your word of advice to the government of Nigeria and to the people, especially those who are attacking this policy?
I think, as I said, if they're attacking the policy, then you have an alternative. Train a Nigerian. We have very smart people. I tell you what, I'm just a product of grace of God, because the truth of the matter is, I have people that are way smarter than me. They don't even need to read that much. I spend hours reading, they spend minutes, but it's just opportunity. Why not give those people opportunity? Then the second thing is this. Remember, Nigeria is so smart that we're actually exporting our, the whole Japa syndrome. What is that? That is exporting our workforce. So we have a lot of workforce in here, and we can't do it. Now, the second thing is, I like to say something to the Nigerian government. Drafting and signing policies is not the determining factor. The determining factor is in the discipline of implementation. It's very important. I would end by saying, look, a chicken that is left to the community to be fed would die of hunger. Somebody needs to be given ownership. Because why? By the time the chicken goes to house A will say maybe he has eaten from house B. House B will say, well, maybe he has eaten from house C. And that way that chicken will die of hunger. The government needs to really hand over certain responsibilities to certain agencies and track their progress. Let it not just be an all affair. Oh, Nigeria is doing this. Who is then Nigeria? And everyone will argue, well, I'm not the government. I'm not this. I'm not that. Let's hold people by the stewardship of those particular mandates that is being given. The initiative is good, but I've seen times without number. I will take you back to the Nigerian gas master plan. We had a master plan, and by now Nigeria should have been better than some industrial hubs. But it was in the implementation that it failed. So we need a good stewardship of implementation. And as for Nigerians, I would like to say, Nigeria is going through a whole reset. Please be patient and constructively add value to the body of knowledge, constructively add your contributions, and just be patient. This is the only country that we can call home. Every other country, perhaps, we may not feel as comfortable. And I think we'll just do fine. I think there are indicators that we're getting into a very sweet spot. The next 1.5 years, I think the Nigerian economy should come out very strong.
Very strong point there. Thank you so much, Dr. Wisdom Enanng. We truly appreciate you taking out the time, and do enjoy the rest of your activities and engagement for today.
Thank you. Thank you very much.